The Witcher Chronicles. A millennia ago, there occurred the conjunction of the spheres, a great cataclysm that left in its wake the birth of magic. Great rifts appeared from many different realms, and the world of humans, dwarves, elves, and gnomes now became home to creatures of all shapes and sizes, many of which were unnatural, twisted, and evil. Thus the need for the Witchers was born. From a young age, Witchers were rigorously trained in combat, herbs, potions, magic, and the study of monsters. Eventually, they underwent a dangerous, grueling ritual of dark magic and alchemy, designed to cause them to mutate and evolve. Those who survived would gain abilities which would better allow them to combat the evil creatures of this world. Now, pull up a chair next to the fire, and allow me to regale you with the story of one such Witcher. His name was Valek, and like all Witchers, he was reviled and revered in equal measure. It all depended, you see, on who you asked. It was early spring, and like his brothers, he had wintered in the Witcher compound in Kaer Morhen. It was their custom to do so every year, to pass the winter drinking, eating, resting, training, and regaling each other with the stories of their recent exploits. Although Kaer Morhen was the wolf school compound, and Valek was from the school of the cat, he had made friends with several of his wolf comrades, and they often invited him to stay the winter, despite their clan's troubled and intertwined history. But that's a story for another day. Several of his comrades had left the compound 2 weeks earlier with the first spring thaw, but he stayed behind to perfect 2 new potions he had been researching. Although he enjoyed his time in Kaer Morhen, he was always thankful for the spring, when he could venture out into the world once again. His first stop after coming out of the mountains was usually a sleepy little hamlet called White Orchard. Well, Thunder, we're almost to Ravenwood. I wonder if it's changed much in the last year. It'll be nice to eat a hot meal again. Yes, I'll get you some green apples, as always, don't worry. Most places only tolerate Witchers at best, but the people of Ravenwood are actually civil to me. It's a nice change of pace. Probably because I helped them out with that banshee a few years back. Some time afterward, the Witcher reached the bustling village. His enhanced senses took in the sights and smells before he fully reached it. It felt good to be back. He made his way to the vendors on the main street and dismounted his horse. Oi, Master Witcher, nice to see you again. Valek nodded and waved politely and turned to the merchant woman before him.
Oi, Valek the Witcher, well met. I'm glad to see you made it through the winter and are right as rain.
It's always nice to be back, thank you.
Now, what can I get you today, love?
A small bag of coffee, that bit of salted pork. Oh, and 3 green apples, please.
Right, there you are. That'll be 3 marks.
Valek passed her the coins, thanked her again, and turned and headed down the street. He saw some familiar faces from his previous visits. The children were a little older and a little taller. Then he came upon the small pub. He hitched his horse and walked in. He approached the bar to make his order.
Good afternoon. What can I get for you today?
A plate of eggs and potatoes and an ale, please. I'll be at that table over there.
Right, here's your ale to get you started. I'll get your food to you in just a bit.
Valek could see the bartender do a double-take when he first saw him. He knew his appearance caught his attention. This wasn't the same bartender that was here before, but he said nothing. You see, as a result of the Witcher ritual, Valek's appearance had changed somewhat. His skin was a pale white, his hair the color of ash, and his eyes were a milky white, with no visible pupils or irises. His appearance had earned him the nickname the Ghost from his comrades. Valek's eyes swept over the whole pub, taking in everyone there, subconsciously looking for any potential threats, anyone out of the ordinary. It was such an automatic reaction he didn't even think to do it anymore, it just happened. He took his seat at a table in the back of the pub, as was his custom, and sat down, greedily drinking the ale. As he was letting the ale soothe his parched throat, he noticed 2 men at a nearby table eyeing him curiously. He was used to that and paid it no mind. Finally, though, one of the men stood up and approached his table. He was fairly certain he knew where this was headed. Either they knew he was a witcher and had a bounty to offer, or they didn't know he was a witcher and wanted to pick on him based on his appearance. As part of the ritual that created them, witchers' emotions were blunted. They still had them, but to a much lesser degree than normal folks. Luckily for men like these, witchers usually had a very long fuse.
Look at this one, eh? He's white as a ghost. Does something scare you, white little mister? Oi, I'm talking to you. Look at him. He's so scared he can't even look me in the eye.
You're not worth my attention. Now do yourself a favor and go sleep it off. This apparently angered the other man at the table, and he now got up and approached Valek's table.
You talk mighty tough with those two swords to back you up, mate. But you look like a dandy. They say you're one of those witchers, but I don't think you fought anything in your life. I think you're all fluff and bluff.
At this, Valek turned his hard gaze directly on the men. When he stared hard at them, you could tell it took away some of their resolve. I wouldn't need either sword to take care of the likes of you two. You're about as menacing as a constipating shit. Now if we're done with this dance, either make your move or shut your mouth and sit down. I'm hungry and want to eat in peace. The other patrons were staring with wide eyes, waiting to see what would happen next. The two men stared at each other for a few moments, clearly trying to decide if this was worth pursuing or not. Finally, the alcohol got the best of them.
If you're so tough, surely you can take two blokes like us, eh? Stand up and show us what is so great about a witcher.
Valek let out a resigned sigh. This wasn't the first time this had happened, and it very probably wouldn't be the last. It almost amused him, really. He knew instinctively that there was absolutely no threat here. He stood up and stared at them, lifting an eyebrow as if to say, "What next?"
I'll take the first crack if it's dandy, eh? Then you can have what's left. Come on, Witcher. Let's see what you got.
The man stepped forward, pulling back his arm for a punch. Valek shifted his legs and widened his stance casually. The punch came in, and the Witcher shifted his weight back, drifting just beyond reach of the incoming fist. Then he suddenly stepped forward, exploding a fist into the punk's midsection, taking the wind from his lungs and doubling him over. Valek then grabbed his head and slammed it hard against his table, knocking him completely out cold, crumpling to the ground. This enraged his friend, who came rushing in. Valek actually chuckled, trying to hold back a full-blown laugh at the predictability of men like this. He was crouched low, rushing in at full speed. Valek lifted his right leg, exploding a front kick into the unfortunate punk's head. The kick stopped the punk in his tracks, and he fell so fast and hard to the floor he landed on his face, as out cold as his friend. Valek glanced around the pub, making sure no one else wanted in on the action, and saw no such indication. Many of the patrons were laughing, and a couple even clapped, which he took as a good sign. He did a mock bow and sat back down at his table, just in time for the bartender to bring his food over. He ate his food in peace, getting a nice full belly. He thanked the bartender, apologized for the commotion, and took his leave. He walked back out to the street, grabbed his horse by the reins, and was planning on making his rounds in the rest of the village. They did have a small inn in Ravenwood, and he could use a good night's sleep in a soft bed. Suddenly, a young woman approached him and spoke excitedly.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Are you the Witcher?
That's right.
Please, sir, can you come with me? The father needs to speak with you. Something terrible has happened.
Lead on. I'll see him. A short time later, the young lady had led him to the church on the edge of town. He could see the priest standing out front, waiting for him. The woman thanked him, excused herself, and scurried off. The priest stepped forward and extended his hand, shaking his vigorously.
"Oh, Master Witcher, thank the gods you're here. I had heard you were in town again. Luckily, word travels fast in such a small community. Something terrible has happened, and I didn't know who else to turn to. The village has no constabulary or sheriff. Forgive my manners. I'm Father Tristan."
Try to calm down, Father, and tell me what's happened.
Someone's been killed. It's horrible. Torn to pieces by the quick look I got of them.
Where did this happen? Can you show me?
Yes, of course. It's right over here, near the tree line.
The father rushed the Witcher to the very edge of the church grounds, and a little beyond. As they approached the tree line, he saw the grisly image come into view.
You see? She's been torn to pieces. It was our village herbalist, Lysandra.
Do you know what happened exactly?
It was 2 days ago. I was in the church, attending to some chores. It was early evening. Lysandra had told me she was going to be gathering some herbs nearby. I heard a blood-curdling scream. It took me a few seconds to realize where the sound was coming from. I rushed out here as fast as I could. The screaming stopped as I was on my way. As I approached her, I thought I saw someone or something run back into the forest.
As the priest talked, the Witcher let his senses and experience take full rein. He examined the body swiftly, as well as the area around the body, looking for clues or tracks.
It looks like an animal attack, but I just don't understand it. Why would an animal attack her for no reason? It didn't even eat her. Oh, this is so ghastly.
Why indeed. The Witcher stood up and surveyed the area, looking back at the church and graveyard. It may not be a coincidence that the attack occurred this close to the graveyard and that the body wasn't eaten.
Oh? How do you mean?
A bear, wolf, or cougar wouldn't have done this. They eat what they kill right away. This may have been a ghoul attack or an owl ghoul. They're undead scavengers that feed on rotting flesh.
Oh my, how ghastly!
Ghouls attack their prey and kill them, coming back days later to feed once it's been decomposing. They may have been coming to the graveyard to dig up the corpses, but your herbalist was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Oh heavens no! That poor, poor woman!
Ever since the Northern Wars started, these creatures have multiplied and become quite bold. They often travel in packs and often attack living prey. There may be a nest nearby. I'm going to have to go find it and take care of them.
I managed to take a collection from the village. People donated as much as they could. 5 gold and 10 silver? I hope it's enough.
That should be fine. Now, Father, I need you to stay indoors as much as possible over the next day or two. If this is a ghoul or owl ghoul attack, they'll be back soon to claim their prize.
I understand. What will you do?
I'm going to wait an ambush for them to come back, then kill them. Then I'll head into the forest and see if I can find a nest. They tend to come out at night, so that makes my job a little easier. If they don't come back within the next couple of days, I'll head into the forest and look for them. He buried himself in leaves and twigs that night, lying in wait for the scavenging beast to come back. The first night passed without incident. On the second night, as he was lying still in his bed of leaves and twigs, his enhanced senses began prickling. His ears picked up the first sign of trouble, a slight rustling of leaves and cracking of twigs. Then his nose caught the scent, the horrible, sickly sweet smell of ghouls. He was hoping there were no owl ghouls in the group, as they were larger and more vicious than their cousins. His night vision was superb, and he scanned the area. Soon he saw the shapes coming out of the forest. He could see 4 of them at least, and his instincts had been correct. They were ghouls. Ghouls were unnatural, vile creatures, squat, gaunt, and a sickly grayish-green color, with vicious fangs and claws. They came and surrounded the corpse, preparing to feast on the carrion. Valek decided to take a precaution and pulled one of the decoctions out of his satchel that often proves useful against necrophages. He pulled the cork from the little bottle and swallowed the contents. He felt the familiar warmth and tingling spread throughout his body, and he knew it had taken effect. Called a black blood potion, if a necrophage, such as a ghoul or drowner, drew blood on him, it would harm them as well. He was hoping it wouldn't come to that, but he wasn't about to take any chances. When they were fully distracted eating their dinner, Valek slowly and quietly rose from his earthen cocoon, like some horrible ghost rising from the grave. He knew the next step had to be done quickly, for when he unsheathed his sword, they'd surely hear it, and he would have only a second or two to take advantage of the surprise. Witchers always carried two swords, a regular steel sword, which he used on humans and any normal beasts. Then they carried a silver sword, which was particularly useful on unnatural and undead creatures. His hand grasped the hilt of his silver sword, and he very slowly stepped closer, coming up behind one of the ghouls. In one swift motion he pulled back and thrust the blade hard through the closest ghoul's back, cleaving its spine in two and killing it instantly. The three remaining ghouls reeled in surprise, and before any of them could react, the silver blade swept sideways and down in an arc, swiping another ghoul's head from its shoulders. The two remaining creatures growled, hissed, and grunted in anger, and began slashing wildly at Valek. His armor deflected 2 blows, and his sword yet another, but he had to act fast. He launched a hard kick at the ghoul on the left, throwing it onto its back, stunned. As the other ghoul crouched low, preparing to pounce, he outstretched his right hand and called upon one of the few magical spells he knew, which they called signs. There were 4 of them, and they were very simple but very effective. This sign was called Igni. As he performed the sign, a jet of searing hot flame sprang from his hand, engulfing the unfortunate ghoul, which began kicking around in pain and fright. The Witcher put it out of its misery with a quick final blow. The remaining ghoul had regained his feet and was springing forward as Valek turned his attention on it. Out of pure reflex, he moved his sword between him and it, pointing forward. The ghoul's body impaled itself on the silver blade, killing it instantly. Valek lowered the blade and used his foot to push the carcass free of the weapon before sheathing it. He knew his task was only half accomplished. He needed to make sure there wasn't a nest nearby, with even more ghouls there. His plan to wait for the ghouls had been doubly useful, because not only did it lure them to him, but now he could use his enhanced sense of smell to follow the scent back to wherever the ghouls had come from. Thinking ahead, he went back to his horse and grabbed his bow and a few arrows. After telling Father Tristan he was headed for the nest, he took his leave. He moved into the forest, swiftly but quietly. He allowed his superb senses full rein, pulling in all the sights, sounds, and smells in the area. He picked up the distinctive scent of the ghouls immediately, and all he had to do now was follow it. For some time he had slowly but steadily made his way through the forest, the scent guiding him easily. Then his night vision picked up 2 moving forms about 30 feet ahead. He recognized them immediately from their hunched-over appearance. More ghouls. Very quietly he made his way behind a large tree, perhaps 20 feet from the roaming creatures. After the 2 ghouls were quietly dispatched, he made his way forward, securing the area, and examined it further. Then he saw it, a small cave up ahead, and the smell of ghouls was even more powerful now. He had found the nest. He had no idea how many might be in there. His black blood decoction was still in effect, thankfully. He knew there was only one way to do this. Pulling out his silver sword once again, he took one deep breath, then moved into the cave. His eyes immediately picked up only one hunched form. It was larger and paler in color. An owl ghoul. Lovely. It saw him come into the cave and began growling instantly, green saliva dripping from its open mouth. The creature came running at him, and he prepared to meet it. It came in, swiping wildly with its razor-sharp claws. Valek bobbed and weaved, slapping aside a few claw attacks with his sword. He thrust the hilt of his blade into the owl ghoul's face, causing it to stagger backward, giving him time to mount a counterattack. He swiped with his sword, but the creature recovered more quickly than expected and jumped to the side, away from the blade. It darted back in a flash, batting away the sword and attempting to bite Valek in the neck. At the last instant, the Witcher pivoted and threw up his left arm, protecting his neck. The bite landed on his forearm, piercing through the leather armor. He grunted in pain, but then the black blood potion did its work. There was a flash, and smoke erupted from the wound, causing the owl ghoul's head to snap back in pain and surprise. It was only stunned for a second or two, but that was all a Witcher needs. The silver blade cut in a vicious arc, decapitating the beast where it stood, its body falling lifeless to the ground with a thud. Catching his breath, the Witcher sheathed his sword, wincing with the pain in his forearm. He left the cave, then made his way out of the forest, back to the church grounds. Moments later, he was talking to Father Tristan.
Oh, thank the gods you've returned, Master Witcher. Are you all right?
I will be, only minor injuries. I'll have to treat my forearm to avoid infection. The good news is, I found the nest and took care of them.
Oh, what wonderful news! Wonderful indeed! I cannot thank you enough for your assistance, my friend. I will make sure the people of this village hear of your good deed. You will always be welcome here.
I appreciate it, Father. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go wash the dirt and grime off me and get my arm treated. I'll probably move on in the morning. And so it was. Valek the ghost had once again helped the people of White Orchard. After a hearty breakfast the next morning, he mounted his horse and made his way into the rising sun, where his next adventure awaited. Thank you very much for listening to The Witcher Chronicles. This project was written and produced by Jason Fella. The part of the narrator and Valek the Witcher played by Jason Fella. The part of Father Tristan played by David Ian. The part of the young village woman and the merchant woman played by Maddie Nolan. The part of the bartender played by Cody Palmer Furman. The part of the drunk pub bully number 1 played by Gethin Hughes. The part of the drunk pub bully number 2 played by Peter Daisley. Thank you again, and I hope to see you the next episode.